Well, it's nice to see you all. Nice to see you monks. Hello. We enjoyed the Devarshi sent us the plans for the monastery. Looks wonderful. The kind of brief for it, I would say, rather than plans. Anyway, we greet you all. We have been chatting just briefly with those in the virtual community, and now we greet all of you who have also joined. So as Bharat, Gil, and Shamini have said, we're here in California, and we were mentioning that it's wonderful to be able to be together with people really all around the world, and especially all around India. And it's very nice. And so we'll be doing these, we call them conversations, because they aren't really talks or lectures. They're just a chance to have a conversation with each other. And so if you have questions or comments or things you'd like to discuss, just put them in the chat box. But we'll start out just briefly talking about the subject that was suggested for today, which is how to dedicate our lives more perfectly to God. And let me start by saying that Nayaswami Jaya, early on in his discipleship, once he learned of reincarnation and of how many lives we have, how many lives it takes to get to the point where you even want to know God, he made a decision and he said, well, you know, I've had so many lives and I don't know whether I'll have many more or not, but God, I dedicate this life at least to you, to finding you. And it's a very nice concept to dedicate. When we speak, at least my sense of the word dedicate is that you have a desire, but that desire can be kind of, you know, dreamlike or just a fantasy. But when you really want something, then you decide that you're going to give it your focus and you're going to give it your energy. We were just watching a movie about it's called Swimmers, and it's about a Syrian girl who has this great dedication to swim in the Olympics.
Based on a true story.
Yeah, based on a true story. And it's basically about it really connects you with the experience of those people who have kind of a hopeless life and are trying to immigrate to another country and the difficulties of it. But woven into that is also the fact that she's trying to be an Olympic athlete. Well, if you're trying to do something at a high level, like be an Olympic swimmer, you have to get up early in the morning, you have to train, you have to watch your diet. Your whole life becomes focused around that goal. Well, how much greater is the goal of finding God? And so to dedicate more means that we need, if the desire is strong, if the desire isn't strong, then of course that's where we have to work. We have to work to increase that desire of wanting God. And we can come back and touch on that. But if the desire is strong, then the issue becomes, how can we focus our energy, both during meditation and during the day, on that goal of finding self-realization? And to a certain extent, what it really means is that all of the little choices, or as many of the little choices as possible that we may need to make in terms of, this will help me with my goal of finding God, or this won't. And so we continue to increase those things that move us that way and eliminate those things that distract us or take us away from it. And it's really that simple. the concept is simple. The living of that is difficult because God has created this world in order to distract us, in order to involve us and engage us. And there are so many, many, many things in life, in everyone's life, that are basically waving and saying, look at me, pay attention to me. Might be children, might be job, might be health, that could be a myriad of things. But the whole world is saying, look at me, look at me. And where we have any choice, we have to say, well, I've looked at you. I've looked at you for many, many lifetimes. This life, I'm going to try to look at God. I'm going to try to look at my spiritual search. And so we can come back and talk about techniques of doing that, but it's meditation. We have to have meditation, or that desire won't be fed. Think of meditation as the food of God, feeding that desire, fueling that. Then during the day, we need some form of service to help others, and to think as we're doing that we're doing this on behalf of Guru, or as part of our spiritual life. We need also then to kind of turn our little choices. Master said that the minutes are more important than the hours, or the days, or the years. Meaning that the little choices that we make, what kind of food do we do little prayers during the day? All of those little choices, if we continually move those toward God, then that's helpful. And the final thing that I'll add that are big factors, big helps along the spiritual path, is just what we're doing now. Having satsang and having that as deeply and as often as possible, because will help reinforce and increase the dedication of each other, because we're all focused on that.
Thank you, Jyotish. It was very inspiring. I'll share a few thoughts as well. You know, Swami Kriyananda had often used the image that to be really, to find fulfillment in the spiritual life, you need to be like a long distance runner. So in other words, I've seen many people on the path who come on and they're all enthusiastic and they're meditating hours and hours every day, but they're not taking into account who they are and what their life is. And unfortunately, very often they burn themselves out. And so it's much better to, as a long distance runner must do, you train. You train with, first you start with shorter goals, and then you lengthen your goals, and you build your strength, and you build your commitment, and you build your depth of meditation. But it doesn't come all at once. What does come all at once, I should say, is the desire to change who we are. And I would often think, you know, when I first came on the spiritual path, I didn't think, oh, I want to know God. I liked meditation. I was drawn to it, and I wanted to learn how to do it. And I wanted to learn how to do it well. And I just followed that thread. And little by little, everything improved. All things in future will improve if you're making the right spiritual effort now, is something that Master said. Sri Teshwar, excuse me, I believe. But so to look at your life, to set goals, but to have the goal, the end goal in mind of really being a realized, self-realized yogi. That's the goal for all of us. But then we have to take the steps along the way. And one very important component is self-honesty. Just to say, okay, look at your life, say, here I'm avoiding living spiritual principles that I know I should be, or I'm don't make excuses. In other words, well, I couldn't meditate this morning because I had to get to work early. Be self-honest and just say, well, I could have gotten up earlier, and so forth. So if we really are self-honest with ourselves in our motives, don't ever make excuses, spiritual excuses, except, okay, I didn't do well today. I rushed through my meditation. Tomorrow I will try better. And in the Bhagavad Gita, the commentaries or the translation Swami uses in writing the essence of the Bhagavad Gita, it said, even if you can't think of me, bring me your intention. That's very good. My intention is to be dedicated to God. Maybe I waver, maybe I fall from my goal and get caught up in things, but my intention, hold on to your intention and be self-honest every day. I could have done better. I could have gone deeper, but I allowed myself to drift. And so seeing a long-term pattern, train for that long-term pattern. I'll just share something. Jyotish and I have both run marathons, 26 miles. And you start, not for a number of years, but we did it in younger days. But you start by just running what you can. And then you build and you build and you build. And by the end, 26 miles doesn't seem very different than 1 mile because you've built the strength. And so remember that if you continue with consistent, self-honest, steady focus on the spiritual life, the day will come when sitting in meditation is the most fulfilling, joyful, rewarding thing that you do. It may not seem like that now, but if we continue, that's where we're going. And to just keep that goal in mind. And of course, the grace of the Guru, we can't ignore that. I've seen so many people who began the spiritual path at Ananda over the years, my generation. And it was the humble, quiet ones that kept going and kept going deeper and more radiant, becoming more radiant spiritually, because they tuned into the Guru. The ones who say, oh, I'm a yogi hotshot, they drift away. But the ones that say, Lord, I cannot do this without you. I can't even begin to think of you without your grace. Those are the ones. And our prayer is for each of you, that you are those ones. And at the end of this lifetime, we can just all rejoice. Maybe we'll get to Haranya Loka. I've just been reading about that. Nice place to go. Nice goal. And we'll all be there and we'll say, wow, we did it together with God's grace, Guru's grace. And it's not an impossible dream. It's a reality.
Thank you so much for those inspiring words. You know, what you were saying at the end, Devi, remind me that sometimes our prayer or our affirmation is not, I want only you, Lord, but I want only you, Lord.
Exactly. And that's not a bad prayer.
Yeah,
it's not a bad prayer.
I'll just say from my personal experience, I started out, outwardly repeating, I want only you, but inwardly thinking exactly that. I want only you. But gradually, if you stay dedicated, then other things fall away and you really do want only you. And then, for me at least, there are still echoes of things that come in, but I don't really want them. It's more like the echo of past momentum is still there, but it has actually transformed into really, I want only you, Lord, and the rest are annoyances.
And, you know, once we were walking with Swami Kriyananda, and he said, you very quietly, you know, at the end of his life, he became more and more inward. His outward work was more or less done. It was up to all of us to carry on what he had started. But he said very quietly, I no longer can tell where Swami Kriyananda ends and Yogananda begins. Beautiful thought. And I'm going to share something, I hope it's okay, a little personal. Jyotish's dream about Swami.
Sure.
You want to say?
Well,
this happened just a few nights ago.
Yeah, I have to recall it. So I was, it was some sort of a small gathering, like a satsang or something. And we were bringing a young man to meet Swamiji. And this young man had some technology that he wanted to talk with Swamiji about. And so there was a small gathering of people, and Swami was there. And so Devi and I came in bringing this young man, and we introduced him to Swami. And Swami was in a much younger form than the body that most of us are used to seeing him in. So if you've seen picture of his time in India in 1962 to 68, that kind of time, that was more what he looked like. Anyway, so we introduced this young man to Swamiji, and Swamiji said, "Are you staying?" And I thought he referred to, "Are you staying here while I talk to this young person? And are you staying with this group?" And so I said, "Yes, of course we're staying, Swamiji." He said, "Good. I've been wondering when you're going to stay here in India."
So we kind of took that as
a sign.
Yes. And I want to just take a moment to greet Haridas and Roma, our dear, dear friends. Hello.
Those who are staying in India.
Yeah. Okay, so any questions that you want to know?
There's one up here on the chat, which maybe I'll just...
Or Bara can read it.
Yeah, Bara can read it.
Yeah, Shamini would like to read it. Okay. I have read somewhere that as a part of pure consciousness, we can manifest our thoughts in reality. Is it so? If yes, what kind of thoughts are manifested in reality and how it happens?
Okay, well, that's an interesting question. First of all, in pure consciousness is part of it. So you have to be dedicated. Let me put it this way. Master said that at night when we dream, it seems like we're looking at something that's reality. And yet when we are meditating and we try, let's say, to visualize the face of Master or visualize something, it doesn't seem nearly as clear, nearly as powerful. Master said it's simply because during sleep we have withdrawn the prana and there's more prana in the brain, and therefore what we see looks clearer and more real. And if we can do that during meditation, then our visualizations will look clear. And so think of it as the more prana we can bring to consciousness, instead of having it dispersed through the senses, the more we can do that, then the more powerful our consciousness becomes. And then when our consciousness is powerful like that, then first of all, we can draw a true visualization or a true, experience of God. And that experience further magnetizes us. And eventually, if the consciousness is very powerful and very pure, then we can manifest things in what we would think of as outward reality. But it depends on that withdrawal of consciousness. And it's a good question for today for dedication. I'll just tell a brief story. There was a Hollywood actor who came to Master and it became a disciple. And he was quite a character. But in his first meeting with Master, he said, you know, this religion stuff, when I was growing up, religion basically told me you can't do this, you shall not do that, you shan't do that. He said, I'm interested not in what I can't do, I'm interested in what I can do. What does your religion have to say about that? And Master was such a genius. He said, I'm sure he could smell on the person the fact that he smoked. He said, do you smoke? The man said, yes. And Master said, you may continue. Man was a little bit surprised by that. And then Master said, do you drink alcohol? The man was a little bit more guarded. He said, yes, I do. And Master said, you may continue. And then Master said, do you like the company of women? And this Hollywood actor said, yes, I do. And much to his surprise, Master said, you may continue. And the man was very surprised by this. But then Master said, but if you follow this path, I have to warn you that the desire to do those things will fall away. And so coming back to this question, as our consciousness becomes more pure, the desire to manifest anything begins to fall away. And in higher consciousness, pure consciousness, the only thing we want is to do the will of God. And so the great masters don't manifest anything from their individual egoic will because it's gone. They're only manifesting things because that's what they feel God wants them to do.
And we need to also bear in mind that sometimes people ask the question, well, what powers do I get from the spiritual path and so forth? Our path is not a path of powers or manifestations. One time someone said to Master, your critics are saying that you've lost your power. And Master said, I don't know that I ever had any power. And that's not what we're looking for. The power we're wanting is the power to dedicate our lives totally to God and then let him take care of the details. I love this story of a saint, a devotee who is very devoted and very dedicated. And the Lord Krishna appeared to him and said, you are such a beautiful devotee. I will grant you any wish you want, any boon you want. And the man thought for a moment and he said, this is the one I would like. Wherever I will go in my wanderings, wherever my shadow falls, may whoever it falls on, may that person be healed or blessed or helped in some way, but may I never know it. And I like that prayer because it keeps our intentions pure. So we have a lot more questions. We'll try to keep our answers more brief.
And there is also some pre-sent questions as well. So we'll do a mixture of the chat plus these ones.
Okay.
Okay, so maybe just, both of you were speaking about self-honesty in the beginning. And maybe that ties into this one as well of just, what does a dedicated life to God look like? Because it's like self-honesty, it's a little difficult to see, isn't it, sometimes? And so is there like an external way people can see that? Or what does it look like?
Well, I think it's a matter of focus. That's what I meant by self-honesty was don't let your thoughts and your intentions don't justify falling short of your goal. The devotee just is able to say, I'm not meditating well now, but I will try better tomorrow. My intention is to try hard. So to keep that momentum going, we have to what does a life look like? It's a life, the word intention is a good word. It's a life of focused intention, that this is my goal, and you get to the point where maybe you want to relax and you turn on a movie, you watch it for 2 minutes and you just think, this is not uplifting my consciousness. So self-honesty is always keeping the spotlight of your mind turned to God. And if you're in a conversation with someone and you find you're getting into negative patterns or judgment of other people, you either walk away or change the conversation, change your own thoughts. So keeping the spotlight of your mind focused on what your intention is. And anything, if you go to someone's house and they're serving food that you really, meat or alcohol or whatever it might be, no, you don't, just to be polite, you don't need to do that. So you keep it always focused, and you can be gracious about it. You don't need to be rude, but just to keep that focus. So all your actions, all your thoughts, you try to analyze them and say, is this bringing me closer to God, or is this pushing me away from God? And then you do your best, because we're not there yet, but you do your best to follow that train.
What does it look like outwardly to other people? There are a couple of things. One, those who have dedicated their lives to God, there's a certain kind of aura, a purity, generally a happiness, a centeredness, but there's a sense of energy and focus there. As we dedicate our lives more and more, it's like the needle of our consciousness gets magnetized and it never strays very far. And so if you're around devotees, the conversation could start out about the cricket match, latest cricket match. Well, if that starts out among non-devotees, it stays on the cricket match. If it starts out with devotees, the needle of their consciousness pulls it back, and they might say, and did you know that one of the players read Autobiography of a Yogi? And pretty soon the conversation is about Autobiography of a Yogi. And so one might say the scope of that which interests those who have dedicated their lives to God kind of narrows down. And it's not like they're false or impolite. It's just the needle of their consciousness keeps kind of coming back to some sort of a spiritual topic. And it isn't always philosophy. It can be many things, because God is manifested in many ways. And
one point I want to add too, what does it mean to dedicate your life to God? God it's a big concept. It's a big concept. And I think the scriptures teach us there are, 8 aspects of God: joy and peace and light and love and wisdom and calmness and power and sound, Om. And so you might even pick up, for me, I try to focus on 2 of them, joy and love. And so to dedicate my life to God means to try to live where I'm expressing and resting in joy and love. And that might be helpful too, to kind of make it a little more concrete. Find an aspect of God that is the most meaningful to you. Maybe it's Guru, maybe it's one of these aspects of God, but God in the form of Divine Mother, whatever it is, but don't let it just be a philosophical concept. Make it be real and personal to you.
Wonderful. Actually, you were talking a lot also about that desire for God, and when you cultivate that, oftentimes it takes other things away. And I think this whole thing of seeing where does our mind go naturally is a wonderful self-honesty exercise already. But going back to those distractions, the question was about how in this modern world, because there's so many things with the phone and social media and this and that, can you do? Sorry, can you recommend some way that we can deal with distractions and, to dedicate ourselves more perfectly?
That's the
Yeah,
heart of it all.
yeah. That's complex, and it really depends on each person. But I would say a couple of things would be very helpful. In terms of devices, phones and so on, limit the time that you allow yourself to engage with those. So I would say never look at your devices, never look at your phone before you have finished your meditation in the morning. And then in the evening, I would say have a cutoff time so that maybe it's you will engage with people. Maybe your job demands it or things demand it, but you'll engage up to a certain time and then you won't after that. That cutoff time awakens in the mind the sense that I can control this. It doesn't have control over me, and then you can increase from there. And I'll tell you from my personal experience, you can make that choice, but then the device will creep back in. Then you have to make the choice again, and but eventually you become victorious over it. And that's kind of the paradigm for anything that is drawing your attention too much from God. Start by limiting it, and then eventually, if you can, just eliminate it rather than limit it. We recently had a week-long seclusion during which we didn't have any interaction with emails or any of the things that kind of drive our life during a normal day. It was so freeing, and coming out of that, it was easy and very desirable to limit those interactions.
Yeah, when one of you, Bara Shamani, said, Mary Killer Shamani said, creeping devices. And I think one of the, bylines of the times in which we live is the perils of creeping devices, because they're like tentacles that pull you. And, I'll just tell you a little technique that I'm working on, and it seems to be effective. We get a lot of emails, and anytime, day or night, you open up your device, there they all are. And I can try to trickle answer them. I'll answer this one, I'll answer this one. But then it makes my mind unsettled. For me, what is more effective is to say, for 2 hours now, I am going to sit and focus on answering emails, and then I'm done. It's as much as I can do today. And so if you're using your device, try to do it with focus and consciousness. You'll get a lot more done that way, and you'll be a lot more clear in what you do. But if it's sort of this dribble effect, it keeps you always outwardly engaged, and your responses will not be as well thought out, as helpful as they might be. So again, just like creating systems in your life for when you will meditate, when you will use your devices, and little by little, at first it sounds like you're kind of putting yourself in a straitjacket, but little by little you realize, hey, my life, I'm in charge now. My devices aren't chasing me. I'm deciding when I'm going to pick them up. So it's an ongoing battle, but we all need to find ways to deal with it.
For many years, IBM has done studies on how long people are able to maintain focus or maintain attention. And when they started, it was something like 15 seconds was the average. And then gradually it's decreased and decreased. They postulate, because of devices, phones and so on, until now it's about 7 seconds. And they actually said that a goldfish is able to maintain focus longer than the typical human being. And so don't let your devices control you, especially constant having to pay attention to them.
Thank you. Those are very practical. It also goes back a little bit to Jyotish, as you were saying about the little choices that we make, you know, and how important they are. So the next set of questions, we're just going to combine a few, are about family. And you both know very well in India about how much family plays a big role. And so it's more along the lines of just, you know, when the family is pulling you back and you can't, if they feel like it's sort of, they're not able to dedicate more, or, you know, with, let's say, having a child, a little child, and they're kind of torn between, should I go to the center and leave my child with my friend again, but then they're going to binge watch technology and, you know, sort of, so I feel like I'm ignoring my family, but I'm not able to dedicate to the center or serve in that way. You know, and so instead of getting guilty, I mean, just if there's any way of just how to cope with that with family.
Well, we have marvelous examples from the lives of saints. Lahiri Mahashaya, you know, Babaji said, you need to live the life of an ideal householder. He raised a family, worked in a typical job. Ananda Ma, in many ways, she was married. When she went to her husband's family home, she did all the work. She did the cooking and the cleaning, massaging the in-laws' feet. And I read one book that once someone saw her hands and they were just red and raw. The skin was all torn from all the cleaning and the cooking she had done. But the difference, there's two important things. One, we can serve our family, small children, elderly parents, spouses, brothers and sisters. We can serve them all. But two important things. Try to work on inner detachment. It doesn't mean you don't love. It doesn't mean you don't care, you don't serve. But inwardly, always remember, I read an image once, I think Ramakrishna gave it, the great saint Ramakrishna. He said, we should go about our daily duties like the maidservant going to the rich man's home. We fulfill them all, but then at the end of the day, we return to our true home. Well, that's an allegory, obviously, for you do your duty, you fulfill everything, and it doesn't take you away spiritually if you do it properly, but then at the end of the day, you return to your true home in God and you rest there. And so one is to detachment, and the second one is in that detachment, see all your service, whether it's whatever relation or friend, co-worker, feel that you're serving not that person, but you're serving the God in that person. And Jyotish and I raised this child. There were times when I couldn't meditate. I couldn't go to the satsangs. I couldn't go to hear Swamiji because I was caring for the child, our son. But that time passes. And then you know, if you do it in the right spirit, none of it is a spiritual deterrent. It actually can be spiritually very, very helpful.
I would add a couple of things. One is that it's important to set time for meditation in which you simply won't allow other things to intrude unless it's something like you have an infant. But most of us watching aren't caring for an infant. If you have an infant, a young child, then you have to pay attention to their needs. They can't control the need for attention. But as children grow older, and especially as they mature, and now we're dealing with adult people, you can set boundaries and you can say, this is my meditation time and I'm simply not available during my meditation time. And people might complain at first, but they'll gradually accept that. And so setting boundaries for your spiritual time and holding those boundaries is important. And it's also important, I won't go into this, but set other kinds of boundaries too, so that you don't allow family to pull you into negativity or into things that you don't want to do. And the people will adjust if you're firm enough. And so that, and then Devi touched on it, but those things that you do feel that are right and dharmic for you to do, then do them with willingness and do them joyfully, and try to hold in your mind that you're doing them for God, or better than that, with God. And if you can do that, then it won't seem so onerous.
One last thought, because this is a very important topic and we could go on at length, but truly the greatest gift you can give to family and loved ones is your spiritual life. And I've seen it personally, and I've seen it in the lives of my friends, to be living in close association with somebody who's really sincerely seeking God. That affects people on a very deep level, whether they mock it or reject it or whatever, but still it's a blessing for them. And in time, they will come to realize it. And I know there are people watching, I won't name names, that at first their parents were very resistant and angry about them being on the spiritual path. But over time, they came to appreciate it. And then over time, they became disciples themselves. So don't let people put the false thought in your mind that by seeking God, you're taking something away from them. You're giving them the best possible gift anybody could give another person. And that's to be in association with a soul seeking God.
Remember, at the heart of every soul is the desire to reunite with God. And it may be very covered, very buried, but it's there. And so they will respond to the magnetism of your dedication, and that will lift them up. Okay, next question.
All right. So this is in similar lines. It's two questions again. One is someone who says that they've been told that recognition from other people, especially if they're in authority, is something desirable. So the question is how to lead a life in attunement with God without caring about the opinions of others about us. And the second question is, do negative people basically, does negativity or people with negative thoughts move away from people who are on the spiritual path?
Okay, maybe I'll start with this question. First of all, let me take the second part first. Yes, as our minds become more focused on God, because God is positive, negativity gradually wanes. For many people, it doesn't leave completely, but nonetheless, it's less controlling. And so, and also association with other people that are more positive. Then the question about recognition from people in authority. Certainly we're trained that way, but the devotee should begin to shift that authority to wanting to please God, not wanting to please people who are still, they may have a position of authority, but they don't have the consciousness of a high consciousness. And so the desire to please God, that's a good desire. And so if you have a good role model for us, having Swami Kriyananda, the desire to please him became a way of solidifying our desire to be in tune with God. And so that was a good thing. But the desire to please, I don't know, a boss who tells you that you're not paying enough attention to work and you should forget all this spiritual stuff and you've got to listen to me. Ignore him, at least inwardly.
Yeah, and in autobiography, we have the example, autobiography of a yogi. We have the example of Master's father, who was a dedicated, focused, successful executive, and Lahiri Mahashaya, who just worked as an accountant, but with great focus and dedication. So I think both of those questions kind of come together in that what we do, we should do because we want to do it as well as we can, whatever we're doing, if it's typing a letter, if it's adding up figures, if it's cooking a meal, whatever it may be. So not if we're always kind of looking behind us and saying, oh, am I getting approval? We're not focusing on what we're doing. But if we're focusing on what we're doing with our heart and mind, we'll do well. And then we'll get, positive feedback. There was a story Swami tells in the Path that they were working on one of the temples for Master. I think it was the one in Hollywood. And he was working with a brother monk, and they were putting in what they call studs in the wall. It's kind of the supporting pieces of wood, and then you put the plasterboard up on top of that. And this man was being very, very careful as he nailed each nail into this wood. And someone said, why are you taking so much trouble with this? Nobody's going to see it. It's going to be covered with plaster. And the man said, God will see it. And that's a good, I try to do that too, even in many little things. Oh, I can skip that step. No, don't skip that step. Take every step you need just to take to do it as well as you can. And then whatever people think, they think. But if you know you've really given it your heart and your concentration, it usually turns out quite well.
I would just add that, some people think there's a conflict between succeeding in the world and being spiritual, but that's not true. We should try to succeed at whatever is in front of us. And then it's like we're going to finish that karmic meal and then we can move on. But if we don't focus, then that karma will just hang around. So pay attention, give a focus to whatever you're doing, put your whole heart into it, try to be joyful while you're doing it. But for the devotee, we should also have always within us the sense that, as Master put it in his prayer, I will act, I will reason, I will act, but guide thou my thought, reason, and activity to the right path and everything. And so coming back to the question of authority, we're trying to be in tune with the will of God and to act in accordance with that. And if some other person in worldly authority is pulling us away from that, we at least have the inward responsibility to try to align with God's will.
And then just to touch on negative people and negative thinking, it's sort of, I'll give you a visual example. We've been having a whole lot of rain here in California, and there are a lot of beautiful wild geese that live in our community, and ducks as well. And I was walking along one day, and it was raining quite hard, and there was a duck, and we've all heard the expression like water off a duck's back. Well, I really saw it. There was this duck, and there were these big, raining hard, big beads of water on his back, and they were all just trickling off. And I thought, that's what, if you're centered, negativity it can't get you. And if you're with someone that tends to be negative, don't argue with them. Master, there's a story where he would just say, you may be right, you may be right, you may be right, or you just don't say anything. And then people think you're boring, and they'll go and talk with somebody who wants to engage in negativity. So it's like water off a duck's back. It's just negativity. If you choose not to let it affect you, then it tends to find a more receptive audience.
Another very nice image I heard was, if you're dealing with a negative person, feel like you're in a car And when you're in a car, just roll the window down a little bit. You don't need to open the door and get out and engage. Just if you have to engage with a negative person, do it as minimally as possible, and then roll your positive window back up.
And further, try to if you, let's say in a family or a work environment, if there's somebody you have to interact with that's chronically negative, try to project positive thoughts to them, and maybe you can help change them.
Wow. Yeah. Also, maybe then the opposite of negative company, the satsang. There's a nice question of how important is satsang then, or group activity in finding ourselves getting more dedicated to God? Because they're saying, as many people I believe on our path experience, as I practice the teachings, I find I'm more happy alone. And so is it very important to do that?
I'll use an image that Swamiji used. He said that our thoughts are like unmagnetized metal. So he used the image of a piece of iron having thousands and thousands and thousands of little molecules of iron, and they're randomly pointing every direction. You bring that piece of iron near a magnet, and the magnetism realigns them in a north-south direction. And so being with positive people helps realign our energies in a positive direction. Now, if the magnet has, the iron has become completely magnetized, then it can be in the world, and the world won't pull its molecules in random directions. But that's a very high state, honestly. So the more we can spend with positive people who share our directional magnetism, the better. And then if it's completely aligned, then we may not want to mix very much in the world. We may have the desire to be more alone. But ask yourself honestly, is being alone, do I have the same level of dedication and the same habitual strength of my sadhana and my thoughts as if I have a periodic realignment by being in the company of others?
Yes, Swamiji said it's important to meditate alone, but one should also attend some group meditations, because he said there's value in both. And so, yes, alone time. I mean, as Jyotish said, we just had some week of seclusion. It was wonderful, really wonderful. And if you all even like take a few hours where you just, if that's all the time you have, maybe on a weekend or something, just to be alone and not to deal with the creeping devices and so forth. But so being alone is wonderful. And in a certain sense, we should keep that inner sense of being alone with God with us all the time, whether we're in a crowd or whatever. But to be with others, in a spiritual context, the value is tremendous. I can't tell you the number of work days and satsangs where people, you just transcend your normal state of consciousness, and it's invaluable.
We are at the time right now, but do you have time for one more?
Sure.
Yes.
And we also have time to greet. I just want to say a special greeting to one of the novice monks up in Chandigarh, Riyahant, and he's been following Ananda from South Africa since he was a young teenager, and that you're with us. Okay.
One more.
All right. So again, a combination of questions. So I guess it's two questions, but basically someone is saying, while finding God is a serious endeavor, how can we make the spiritual path also enjoyable? And to that add, in which ways do you feel your commitment has strengthened over the years? If you can say a little more personally.
Okay. First, with the first question, yes, I just wrote a blog, and in the blog, I said the road of life is long and winding, and unless we can enjoy the ride, we'll end up bitter and angry by the end. And so we have to enjoy the day. So try, and I do this, I try to consciously feel joy at the end of meditation, and then to hold on to that joy as much as possible during the day. But just have a good sense of humor. Just take little breaks and just say, I don't have to be grim. Let me enjoy this thing that I'm going through. Sometimes it takes a little bit of a stepping back and being objective, but everything in life is enjoyable. There are two friends of ours, we won't mention their name, they were having an argument, and the husband, kind of in the middle of it, kind of with a twinkle in his eye, said, I'm not caught yet. Are you caught? Right in the midst of arguing. And so that little bit of distance allows one to enjoy even the negative aspects of life.
And remember, self-discipline can be fun. When we said we ran, Jyotish and I ran marathons, the marathon that I ran was with Nayaswami Roma. We trained together and ran together. And it was hard training, hours every week. But we laughed almost every step of the way. We just had such a fun time, and it didn't feel hard. And so just to realize, there's so many quotes. A sad saint is a sad saint indeed. And finding God is the end of all sorrow. So that's our goal. Our goal is joy. And if I'm going to meditate and I hate it, but I'm going to do it and now I'm going to serve, you're missing the point. It should all be done with joy, and it's combining self-discipline with joy, because at a certain point you realize that discipline is joy, and that's where you're going, and that's what you feel. So it's, the Swami Kriyananda was such a marvelous leader, and he, worked very hard. Would have to write all those books and start all these communities and lecture and so forth. But he always had fun as well. And he would read to the community funny stories, and he would just do many, many things. Don't forget, ultimately, it's about joy. And we'll have to remember that.
And in fact, somebody asked him the question about serving and doing something that felt like their responsibility. And Swami said something very interesting. He said, I have a limitation to what I'll do in terms of service. If it is no longer bringing me joy, I just end it. And so that's a good role model. We can't always do it. Sometimes there are just obligations that we have to continue. If we can't cut something off, find a way within ourselves to say, I enjoy doing this because it brings me closer to God or something. But you have to bring positive thought back into your responsibilities.
And then there was a part of the question as well. How have we deepened our life? Was that the question, Barakiko?
Yes. How have you seen that your commitment to God has changed over the years?
Well, God's a tricky fellow. He very sort of unnoticeably, he just asks more and more and more of you. I was looking at a picture of us from 20 years ago, and I thought, boy, we have a lot more responsibilities now than we did then. But it just happens so incrementally, and your depth of meditation, it improves almost unnoticeably. And then you look back and you say, wow, I've come a long way. And so not, Master uses the image, or Swamiji, I believe, it's like planting a seed in the ground. You don't keep digging it up to see if it's growing. You let it grow, you let it mature, you nurture it, you water it, you be attentive to it. And that's what the spiritual life is. It's that long-term nurturing and commitment. And then if you do that, there is absolutely 100% guarantee that you will find your life deepening and more joyful, and you will feel more free inside.
Maybe I'll just add very briefly. For me, it's a long process of eliminating the resistance. There are so many things that we're asked to do, and there's something inside that resists, maybe even being told that we should do something. But gradually, as you do the right thing, you find that you get positive energy back from it. And then you eliminate your resistance to doing the right thing, whether it's meditating or serving or being positive or giving friendship or whatever it is. It begins to be very natural, and you can do it without using up your energy with internal resistance.
I have to say, I love seeing you talking about these two questions, but all the questions, but it's particularly talking about the fun on the spiritual path. It seems that you guys were having a lot of fun talking about it, and that joy also came out so vividly that I guess that's a proof right there of how much it's been deepening your path, that joy that just comes like that. So, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Barikil and Shamini, you bring a lot of joy to whatever you do, and we thank you for that. We had I guess it was a Diwali gathering in Pune that we had that party at the ashram. And so we had people brought nice food and so forth, but then Barikil had created this game where there were all these images from autobiography written down on little slips of paper, and people picked one out, and then they had to draw it on the board, and people had to guess what it was. We had so much fun, and it was focused on God, and it was focused on our teachings, but it was fun at the same time. And I really appreciate from both of you the joy and the lightness that you bring to everything you do.
Thank you so much.
For that, we remember Jyotish got to draw something, and we were all going, wow. Because we didn't want him to stop.
He was holding the marker like if it was a paintbrush, so nicely. And thank you once again for this time together.
Thank you all for joining us. It's been a joy, and we look forward to seeing all of you in person. And it's so many dear friends and beautiful spiritual family God and Guru has given us.
Om Guru. Have a wonderful day. Thank you everyone for joining. Have a good night.
Think of God before you go to sleep.